Good afternoon and welcome back to another ironic introduction to another video. Recently, Kabam sent out an in-game notice stating the changes to the Hood's abilities. The sum of it is that they are reverting effective immediately the Hood's buff and issuing rank down tickets in the future for players who ranked him up since the buff has occurred. Before I dive into comments, criticism, and things that I would like to see, I want to read the whole post so that you have the full message from Kabam. So, greetings, Summoner. This week we released an update for Hood that we believed would make him a more popular choice for our players, but took away a big piece of utility that made him a unique addition to your rosters. Our players made themselves clear and they want that utility back, effective immediately. Hood's abilities have been reverted to the original. We will take our time to take another pass at Hood in the near future and will ensure that when we buff him again, his Fate Seal ability and utility remain intact. Further balance changes to his updated abilities may be required. Summoners that ranked up a 5 or 6 star Hood between the announcement of his update and the reversion will receive rank down tickets in the near future, so they may undo their rank up decision if they wish. Thank you for playing Marvel Contest of Champions, the game team. So, before I dive into comments and criticism, I want to talk about the positives here. So the first is that this was an in-game notice as well as an in-game message. Love that. I think that is the most global way to communicate with the player base. And then if we hit OK and skip it, at least it was in the player's court and we had the chance to look it and we just overlooked it instead of being somewhere on a forum or elusive in some kind of news notification, etc. This is the best way to handle it, especially for something of this scale. The next thing is that Kabam is doing something. They're telling us why in the message, and they're telling us what they want to do in the future. So we have all of that right there back to back to back. And I think that is awesome. That is a very effective way to pass on this communication. And at least it gives us with understanding and knowledge of what's going to happen and why. And then finally, the fact that they're issuing rank down tickets. They tell us in the post, and I think that's really good because they acknowledge that people will have ranked him up as a result of the buff, and so you're getting those resources back. Those are all very positive things, and if this is going to happen this way, since this is happening this way, I am glad that those are all present because I think those are key in making this like a successful situation. Well, from a bad situation to begin with. So that said, there are things I want to comment. The very first is that I think a 4-star ranked out ticket should be issued as well. I understand that 4-star resources aren't like the biggest of an issue, but for some players they are, and a lot of players actually rank up the 4-star to playtest, and so they're just sitting with the 4-star reversion that they already know they don't want. And even though it's not the biggest deal, it is a small deal, and I don't think it's much harder than 5 and 6-star ranked down tickets, so I would like to see that as well. The next thing is that in a game like Marvel Contest of Champions, I would like to see the Hood reskinned with the buffed kit that they just took away, because personally, I really liked that buffed kit. I really, really loved it, and I just can't help but hope that maybe we'll get it in some way, shape, or form, because the game has, you know, all the variations of Spider-Man and the multiple variations of Magneto. I would love to see a second variation of the Hood with that exact copy-paste kit, just to have it in the game. I would absolutely, absolutely love that. The next comment is more of a question of whether or not this was a statistic-driven decision, because on the flip side, there are multiple other things they could have done. So the first is that they could have issued rank down tickets to people who had ranked up their Hood pre-buff. And that's a total reasonable thing. And the only reason I can see for why they wouldn't do that is perhaps the pool of players who ranked him up post-buff versus the players who already had him ranked up pre-buff is smaller. If less people ranked him up as a result of the buff, then Kabam might say, okay, it's just easier to revert, we'll come back and we'll see what happens. We'll keep the core utility there, no problem. And if that's the case, I totally respect this decision. And optimistically speaking, that's what I'm going to hope happened, because I do think that would be, you know, the best case result or lead to the best case result. The next thing is that hopefully this sets a precedence, because while I really liked the new Hood's buff, I also advocated for rank down tickets, and that was because they had taken away a core utility of a champion, and that sets the precedence of, you know, future buffs and what do they do in the future buffs and what's off limits and what's not. So this happening and this reaction hopefully means that when Kabam buffs and tunes up champions in the future, they keep the core kit there. Any core utility or value stays. because, you know, that's important to a champion. At that point, you might as well just introduce a brand new champion to the game instead. So I hope that it sets that, and if it does, and if that's the lesson, that's the takeaway, I think that is a really good thing for the community and really good thing for the game in general, so that at the very least we know utility value is there. Finally, the last thing is that when they revisit the hood, the buff feels substantial. I really hope that when they come back, it is a substantial buff. We feel a actual relevant amount of change, because I think that he deserves it, especially after all of this. And the reason I specifically mention is that I'm a little concerned that with the current and present utility he has, that there's the potential for overbalancing or overpowered champion. And I worry about a situation like Ghost, where the hood hits a utility or market or niche value that, you know, Kabam has to go out of their way to indirectly nerf. I have a rant on indirect nerfs if you're curious. But my biggest thing is I don't want to see another champion enter the game where we constantly see, oh, that's a counter to this champion, oh, that's a counter to this champion, and that's it. Like, that's really it. You know, when you see champions who armor break without contacting, everybody says, oh, that's Ghost. When you see champions that prevent evade without doing anything, it's immediately, that's a counter to Quake. Those are just present. It's because of the dominance they have in the game that happens, and I'm concerned about something like that happening with the hood, because the Special 2 utility actually has a lot of really potent potential that just goes overlooked because his damage is really bad. But hey, that's just me. And then one more final addition is, I know that they could have added the SP2 utility back on the present buff. And, that just brings me back to the moment of overbalancing. Also, the fact that Kabam didn't test that in mind, or if they did, like, they had to actively take that utility out. So I just feel like they tested it with the utility in when this is too strong and then took it away. And whether or not it's just because it's a nullify fate ceiling, so that means that, the hood had the potential to, infinitely spam SP2s, which he kind of already does, or maybe it was too potent, or maybe the fate ceiling ability meant that he hit too many broad quantities of utility, and they didn't want to add that to the game. I'm sure that it was already assessed and determined not an option because of that active step. So that's it. Those are my thoughts. I do really, really, really hope for a reskinned version of the hood with that buff skill set in the game, or even just a different champion with that skill set in the game. I would like to see it. But as always, let me know what you think, and I'll talk to y'all later. Peace.